breakthrough infection.
Breakthrough cases of COVID.
They're known as vaccine breakthroughs.
Breakthrough cases.
So-called breakthrough cases. Now, that's when fully vaccinated people still contract the disease.
A new report by the CDC shows thousands of Americans have still contracted COVID after being fully vaccinated.
So there probably are more breakthrough cases that are not symptomatic, who are not going into their provider to get tested.
In the clinical trials, there was 100% efficacy at keeping people out of the hospital. But we're not seeing that in the real world. 7% ended up in the hospital and 74 people died.
The potential for breakthrough infections is in part why indoor mask wearing and distancing is still recommended for those fully vaccinated.
With regard to the breakthrough cases of people who've been vaccinated and ultimately have gotten infection, obviously, this is something that we take seriously and follow closely.
Americans with at least one shot, and 110 million Americans fully vaccinated.
On our way to hitting our goal of 200 million shots by the 100th day in office.
But a Virginia woman says she believes her mother died as a result of the vaccine.
A woman passed away several days after getting her second Moderna vaccine.
The death of an Ionia County wife and mother.
They found her dead in her room.
I was in full body convulsions.
Blood clots.
Flash pulmonary edema caused by anaphylaxis.
Abnormal clotting or pulmonary emboli.
Every bone and muscle in my body was shaking.
Her platelet levels had fallen.
She died. He died.
Fell into a coma.
Died Wednesday.
2 weeks after getting a first dose of a Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine, a 56-year-old doctor in South Florida died this week. It's possibly the nation's first death linked to the vaccine.
This Orange County son worries his mom died because of her second Moderna COVID-19 vaccine dose. The day after her second shot on April 14th at a CVS in Orange, Griselda complained of the expected side effects, chills, body aches, and a fever.
She looked really pale though, really pale. And she just said she was tired and she was gonna go home and sleep.
2 days after her second dose, Griselda's family says they found her dead in her room. A handful of deaths, including Griselda's, are under investigation because they happened 1 to 3 days after the person got a COVID-19 vaccine dose.
The Facebook picture that captured Augusta Turiaco's delight at getting a COVID vaccine. The 55-year-old Italian posting, "Fatto, done," on March the 11th. Despite developing a headache and feeling unwell afterwards, she returned to her work as a music teacher. Her condition worsened. She fell into a coma and died 19 days after having the AstraZeneca injection. Medical records seen by Sky News show blood clots had formed in Augusta Turiaco's body, including in her brain. Her platelet levels had fallen.
Her 58-year-old mother died less than an hour after receiving the Pfizer vaccine. Her mother had flash pulmonary edema caused by anaphylaxis. The medical examiner told Jones they would not be performing a full autopsy.
That ripped my heart out all over again, because when something like this happens unexpectedly, you want answers.
Hamilton County Coroner Lakshmi Samarco is investigating why the seemingly healthy college junior died suddenly. Samarco says Foley received the J&J COVID-19 vaccine Saturday afternoon, the day before he died.
The wife, mom, and animal rescuer developed a persistent headache a week after receiving the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. She died April 19th from an acute subarachnoid hemorrhage, essentially a brain bleed.
Evans' obituary says she died Wednesday from a reaction to the COVID vaccine. In a statement, the Kansas State Health Department says a 68-year-old started experiencing anaphylaxis.
Little is known about the person who died in Placer County, their age, gender, what vaccine they received, and if they had any underlying health conditions. But the Placer County Sheriff's Office says the person tested positive for COVID-19 in late December and was vaccinated January 21st and died several hours later.
And within a couple hours, he just couldn't breathe on his own. He had stomach problems. He was complaining that
he wasn't feeling good.
That's the message tonight from Kyle Zook. His dad died 4 days after getting his second shot of Pfizer vaccine.
And by the time he clocked out, he couldn't breathe at all.
That was January 5th. Within hours, Tim Zook was admitted into the ER of the same hospital he was working at. 2 days later,
He was so bad, he voluntarily told them, "Put me on the ventilator, I want to live." Those were his last words.
The sudden death of a former Detroit anchor and media executive brought loved ones and colleagues together today.
The Detroit media icon was found dead at her home last Tuesday by her husband just 1 day after taking the COVID-19 vaccine.
And in Orange County, an X-ray technician has died after getting his second dose of the Pfizer vaccine. According to the OC Register, 60-year-old Tim Cook had an adverse reaction within just hours of getting that second shot, and he died within a matter of days.
On Thursday, we learned of an Oregon woman in her 50s who developed a serious blood clot in combination with very low platelets and died.
An Auburn woman posting a warning tonight. She saw her grandfather get the COVID vaccine at a senior living facility Thursday. She writes 20 minutes later, he realized his legs felt tingly and he was having shortness of breath. He was wheeled out in an ambulance. 1 hour later, he was in ICU on a ventilator, and 3 hours later, he passed away.
Brandy Parker McFadden sits in her Vanderbilt hospital bed, unable to stand.
Our youngest is like, "Are you ever going to walk again?" And so, we just reassure him this is extremely rare.
The mother of 3 received her second Pfizer COVID shot April 16th. Hours later, an unusual sensation started in her legs.
That's what created the sense of urgency.
James rushed Brandy to the emergency room at Vanderbilt, and then the unimaginable.
I woke up and I was like, I can't move my arms, I can't move my legs. And so he's freaking out, the doctors are panicking.
I'm holding her hand, and her hand is limp throughout the whole thing while she's screaming in pain. And, when the test results are all coming back negative.
10 days later, Brandy is able to move her arms and wiggle her toes. She will now undergo intensive physical therapy, hoping to walk again.
I'm gonna fight, I'm a fighter.
On January the 4th, was very pressured by my employer to get the vaccine. My tongue was spazzing. The next day, I was in full body convulsions and stayed that way for 13 days. I took the vaccine on January 19th. I've had 6 ER visits. There was one day where I had 16 back-to-back convulsions. Just been a long road from there.
When the convulsions started, I knew it had to be from the vaccine. And I got up and I could not use either of my legs, followed by full body convulsions about 2 hours later. My husband took me to the ER, and from there I was transported over to the hospital. I was at Ochsner Hospital for 5 days, and I never got any treatment for convulsions.
That is my daughter workmate. They work at the Sainsbury's in Orpington, and she have a heart problem. She got doctor, and they give her the COVID injection, and that's how it leave her.
Man, that's not good.
Yeah. So I'm not taking that shit.
Oh my God, man. That's crazy. Man, I'm freaking out right now.
Wow. Oh, she's passing out.
Oh my God.
17-year-old Everest Romney got his vaccine shot. A few days later, Everest couldn't even move his neck, and then the migraine started. His mother finally got him a CT scan. Then she got another one ordered on his head, and that is when doctors found out he had 2 blood clots inside his brain, another on the outside of his brain.
The hardest thing was I let him get that shot.
he was healthy and well before. And I was doing my best, and I thought it was the right thing to do, and I don't want to discourage any parents from not doing that, you know. But you question. You can't help but question it when it all goes wrong.
Sorry about my appearance, but long story short, I got the Johnson & Johnson vaccine yesterday. Nobody knows if this is the reason that all this stuff is going on, but started with chest pain, paralysis on my left side. I was rushed over via ambulance to Baylor, Dallas, where I have had numerous scans done. I have had about 8 seizures in the last 2 days. Never had a seizure before. They did find a 3-millimeter brain aneurysm. I am currently hooked up to my EEG so they can monitor my seizures. Thank you everyone for all the prayers, and we are hoping to find answers soon.
I am currently in the ICU. About 2 weeks ago, I had the BACCINE. I am currently in school to become a dental assistant, and on Thursday, I was driving home from school when my right arm fell off my steering wheel and into my lap. I was able to get to the ER, and as I arrived, I realized I couldn't move the right side of my body at all. The emergency room I was in believed that I had suffered a stroke. They had run some tests and realized that I need more medical attention than they could offer. I was then transported by ambulance to the ICU, where I began my journey of fighting for my life. I had been going through a lot of tests, and a lot of stuff was happening, and doctors didn't have answers as to why I was suffering temporary paralysis. I ended up flatlining on 3 different occasions in a 24-hour period. I couldn't remember my friends, my family, myself. Although I still cannot move this right leg, I have a walker now. My foot drags when I walk. Tomorrow I get transferred over to the rehab center, where I have to learn to walk again. I am a young, pretty healthy and active female in my early 20s. Just this past weekend, I was out fishing, camping up north, enjoying time with my friends, scouting for elk season and deer season. I'm a huge outdoor advocate. But due to this vaccine, I don't even know if I'll gain full movement in my leg back.
All they know is that prior to my vaccine, I was healthy, I was whole. And then after my vaccine, I had complete paralysis of my body. I've regained the upper body strength, and I'm working towards both toes moving on left and right.
On March 6th, Terrell received the Johnson & Johnson vaccine in Ashland. But 4 days later,
I began to feel a little discomfort in my armpit, and then I began to, a few days later, began to get an itchy rash. And then after that, I began to swell and my skin turned red.
this red rash quickly spreading, covering Terrell's entire body. His legs and hands almost unrecognizable from swelling and discoloration.
It's been getting worse and worse since Friday. Every morning, it's a little bit more worse. It's covering my entire body. It's also on the palm of my hands.
I am a COVID nurse, or have been for the past 3 months. I ended up taking the Pfizer vaccine 3 weeks ago, to which now I've developed Bell's palsy. right-sided facial paralysis.
I've been through hell and back ever since I took that shot.
Go get vaccinated. Now.
I got one. Michelle got one. People you know got one. And now you can get one too.
You want to hang out with us? Get your vaccine.
We have the vaccines, and we can see the end will come for this pandemic.
Let's just get as many people vaccinated as we possibly can, as quickly as we can.
It's promising to see the first round of people getting vaccinated for COVID-19. A new problem that blood banks are facing is less convalescent plasma donations.
So the reason why after you get the vaccine, you can no longer donate that plasma. So the question is, what does that mean for the people who are sick in the hospital with COVID who need all of that plasma to survive? Brianna Whitney explains.
Vitalant Blood Bank says right now, 1 in every 4 patients hospitalized with COVID-19 requires a convalescent plasma transfusion. But in order to keep that going, donations have to keep up. And with the vaccine here now, they need more donations than ever as the number of eligible donors goes down.
I am just feeling absolutely grateful and thankful to be alive.
Just weeks ago, Arizona State Representative Lorenzo Sierra was on a ventilator with a 13 to 33% chance to live from COVID-19. But the game changer, convalescent plasma, once he started getting that, he made a 180.
They have said that my recovery has been something that they have not seen. So I have to imagine that the convalescent plasma I took did have some part in my recovery.
But now the worry is if donations can keep up with demand for those who need it, like Sierra did.
This is all happening. It's changing every single day.
Once people are vaccinated, they cannot donate plasma. Vitalant Blood Bank says the reason why is because the vaccine causes spike antibodies, and for convalescent plasma, they need nucleocapsid antibodies. Vitalant says they're working with the FDA to get permission for those who had COVID before and have donated plasma before to continue doing so after they get the vaccine.
We're hoping that permission will come through in the next few weeks, to a couple of months.
Representative Sierra says he plans to help as many COVID patients as possible while he can.
Hopefully I can give plasma at least a couple of times before I get my vaccination.
If you had COVID 28 days ago or more, you're eligible and encouraged to donate your plasma to any of the Vitalant locations around Arizona. Brianna Whitney for Arizona's Family.
A rare heart issue cropping up in young people following COVID vaccinations.
The CDC is investigating rare cases of heart inflammation among vaccinated teens and young adults.
They're investigating a possible link between a heart condition and the vaccine in teens and young adults.
16 to 24-year-olds who received the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine have experienced higher than normal cases of myocarditis, an inflammation of the heart muscle.
This is a condition called myocarditis. That refers to an inflammation of the heart muscle.
Scientists had been expecting somewhere between 10 and 102 cases of the rare disease, and so far have received 275.
With myocarditis, the heart is not able to pump as efficiently as it should.
It seems to start with chest pain, shortness of breath, and exercise intolerance.
In 50% of patients, the condition goes away. In the other 50%, the heart muscle does not completely heal.
It's very hard for us to predict who will and who won't recover.
I'm worried about myocarditis. And let me just make a comment, because I've spoken to a number of cardiologists about this. The way we evaluate myocarditis today is based on gadolinium enhancement of an MRI in a person who has chest pain, elevated troponin levels, tachypnea perhaps. And this method of diagnosing myocarditis is very, very sensitive. It doesn't take much of an insult to the myocardium to get a positive gadolinium scan. But we don't know what that means on a long-term basis. Will there be scarring of the myocardium? Will there be a predisposition to arrhythmias later on? Will there be an early onset of heart failure? I think that's unlikely, but we don't know that. And so before we start vaccinating millions of adolescents and children, it is so important to find out what the consequences are, because disease, COVID-19 disease, is disappearing in adolescents and children. And I think we have to be so clear about what we're dealing with. We admitted a 12-year-old boy over the past weekend who, 2 days after his second mRNA vaccine with a troponin level greater than 9, very high level, and evidence of myocarditis. This is not, I cannot believe this is a random occurrence. There is an occurrence. It has to be included in an informed consent if we're going to move ahead. I think it needs a very careful safety evaluation before we recommend it, because I am really concerned that the FDA may, by not insisting on a full BLA, which to me means at least 12 months, maybe even 18 or 24 months of follow-up in children and adolescents before they are recommended to receive this vaccine. I do not feel we can justify a EUA, including children, under an emergency use authorization. The burden of disease is so small, and the risks are just not clear. Caution should rule the day here.
Since being in such a career, I have always been pro-science and pro-vaccination. Before my vaccination, I was a healthy and active 39-year-old. I enjoyed activities outside, traveling and crafting with my family. I also cherished my work in a very busy pediatric dental office. I was not taking any medications prior to the vaccine, and I have never had a COVID infection, and I have been tested for proof. In January, my life changed drastically. Immediately after the injection, I felt an odd tingling type dripping sensation in my arm. I had immediate heart palpitations and a feeling as if I was going to pass out. I'm so sorry. And my blood pressure reading was so high that I don't know how I didn't have a stroke. I cannot quote what it was, but as a hygienist, I take blood pressure readings on my patients before I treat them, my adult patients. And it was so high that I was scared in that moment that something was happening to me. I did eventually stabilize. They monitored me for the 15 minutes and then an extra 30 minutes after. And I did stabilize, so they went on ahead and sent me home. When I got home, I felt a little, woozy, a little dizzy. The next couple of days, I just had a headache and just kind of that feeling of unwell, all of the things that I had signed up for to get the vaccine. But it was 3 days later that my symptoms increased and accelerated. I had a sharp stabbing pain in my scapula area that was just this intermittent, like a knife stabbing pain. I had tingling and numbness throughout my body. It ran down both my arms. I also still had the heart palpitations. I had these internal vibrations, And the only way I can explain the internal vibrations is it feels like you have this little electric shock running through your body, like you're stuck in a vibrating chair, like glued into it, and it never stops. I have tremors in my hands, which has made me leery if I'll ever be able to practice as a hygienist again. And like Cheryl, I am so fearful that I may have some sort of neurological issue after this with Parkinson's. They have ruled out MS, but again, they have not told me that I have anything. They can tell me what I don't have. I have swollen lymph nodes, brain fog. I had brain fog so extreme that I would be having a conversation with someone and I would black out. Try to come back to that conversation and nothing was there. Swollen lymph nodes, muscle weakness, unexplained skin rashes. I had convulsions and nighttime seizures. I had to have my 6-year-old daughter wake me up from a fit in the middle of the night. No 6-year-old should have to do that for their parent. I have also experienced thick, clotting, heavy menstrual cycles. I was so afraid that I literally, and I have it with me, I prepared my will and my obituary for my family because I didn't think that I would wake up to the next day. I have reported my symptoms to VSafe, VAERS, CDC, FDA, Pfizer. I have also sent information to 2 very well-known research institutes, and I have also reached out to prestigious universities. I've been dealing with this for 5 months. These past 5 months, my severe neurological reactions continue to plague me. Every day feels like I'm trapped in the movie Groundhog Day. I go to sleep praying, thinking I'm going to wake up the next morning and be better. And I'm not. I've had multiple tests, more than any person should have to go through this time in their life. I have had x-rays, blood work, MRIs, CT scans, ultrasounds, EEGs, and more. To date, the medical community has still remained baffled and unable to restore my health. I'm scared and frightened for my future. So I do have hope, and this is why I'm here today, speaking out. This is not an easy thing to do, guys. But I hope that our conditions will be researched and studied. I hope that we can find a solution and a pathway to health. That's all we want. I would give anything. I would give my whole life savings if I could go back to January 17th and never to have had to experience this in my life. And 3, that those that are suffering and that those that will come behind us, because the vaccine is still rolling out, that they will benefit from us coming forward and speaking today. We have suffered long enough. I think that we do deserve this time that you've given us today, and we are so gracious that you've taken your time to be here today. But we do deserve to be seen, which you are seeing us today, and heard, you're listening, but we need to be believed. That is the biggest issue. We just want you guys to believe that this is real. We are real Americans. We are real people experiencing these side effects. So I thank you for doing just that today.
Real close. So we can hear you.
All right. So first, thank you, Senator Johnson, for the opportunity to share Maddie's story, and to all of you for your willingness to listen. This isn't easy for me, and this has been very clearly emotional. So I'm going to read what I've written so I don't lose track. My name is Stephanie, and this is my daughter, Maddie, and we live in Ohio. On January 20th, Maddie received her second dose of the Pfizer COVID vaccine as a participant in the clinical trial for 12 to 15-year-olds. All 3 of our kids volunteered and were excited to participate in the trial as a way to help us all return to normal life. My husband works in the medical field, and I have a degree in electrical engineering. We are pro-vaccine and pro-science, which is why we agreed to let Maddie and her 2 older brothers volunteer for the trial. Before Maddie got her final dose of the vaccine, she was a healthy 12-year-old who got straight A's and had lots of friends. She had a life. She was energetic. She was not like this. Although she does still have lots of friends. Upon receiving the second shot, Maddie immediately felt pain at the injection site. And over the next 24 hours, she developed severe abdominal and chest pain. And the way she described the chest pain, and I quote, "It feels like my heart is being ripped out through my neck." She had painful electrical shocks down her neck and spine that forced her to walk hunched over. She had extreme pain in her fingers and toes. It actually made them turn white, and they were cold whenever you touched them. She had edema. So my husband immediately took her to the ER as instructed by the vaccine trial nurse administrator, which is what we were instructed to do. Her blood was taken for a renal profile and tested. She was checked for appendicitis, which she did not have, and given an IV with some medicine, then sent home. However, in the discharge papers from the Children's Hospital ER that she went to, the diagnosis stated adverse effect of vaccine initial encounter. This would be the only time that that was written in her medical charts, but it's in there. Over the next 2.5 months, her abdominal, muscle, and nerve pain became unbearable. She had developed additional symptoms that included gastroparesis, nausea and vomiting, erratic blood pressure and heart rate, memory loss. She mixes up words, brain fog, headaches, dizziness, fainting. She fell and hit her head, and then seizures. She developed verbal and motor tics. She had loss of feeling from the waist down and muscle weakness. Drastic changes in her vision, urinary retention and loss of bladder control, severely irregular and heavy menstrual cycles, and eventually she had to have an NG tube put in to get nutrition. All of these symptoms are still here today. Some days are worse than others. Our greatest challenge came when her doctors began to consider an alternative diagnosis. Well, she really didn't have one before, so it was the first one. So, like everybody else, she had lots of tests, but not nearly as many tests as everybody else, and she's a child. Why didn't they do this? All those tests on her. Sorry. So, because they couldn't figure it out, one physician labeled her as having functional neurologic disorder, saying it was due to anxiety. This concerned us, and we didn't agree with it because she doesn't have the anxiety. Look at her. I mean, what 13-year-old can sit here calmly, okay, if they have anxiety or mental issues? At one point, they even tried to admit her to a mental hospital. So we did seek additional medical opinions, some of which came from this group. In June, we connected her neurologist with another doctor that's doing research on adverse reactions like Maddie's. She was finally provided, but they finally gave her an MRI, did an MRI of her brain, an MRV, and a bunch of additional blood tests. It took 5 months to get that done. Over the past 5 months, Maddie has been to the ER 9 times and has been hospitalized 3 times for a total of 2 months in the hospital. What I want to ask, Maddie volunteered for the Pfizer trial. Why? Why aren't they researching her to figure out why this happened? So other people don't have to go through this. Instead, they're just saying it's mental. If anybody's mental, it's me. So today our journey as parents to help our daughter Maddie continues. All we want is for Maddie to be seen, heard, and believed, because she has not been. And we want her to get the care that she desperately needs so that she can go back to normal. Why is she not back to normal? She was totally fine before this. She did the right thing trying to help everybody else, and they're not helping her. Thanks.
I wanted to talk about it responsibly. I don't want to discourage people from getting vaccines. And strangely, I don't really want to discourage them from getting this one.
Jennifer Gibson says she got the COVID vaccine because she wanted to see life in Canada get back to normal. But the Toronto woman wasn't prepared for what she saw when she looked in the mirror 2 weeks after getting her AstraZeneca shot.
In the morning, I was just looking and I thought, gosh, something is weird with my face. And I thought, whatever, I slept funny, no big deal. And by the end of the day, my husband I was asking him, like, this is weird now. And even with kindness, he had to say, yes, it was.
A phone consult with Gibson's doctor confirmed that she had developed Bell's palsy, a form of facial paralysis.
So honestly, when they said Bell's palsy, it's, devastating to look at half your face being paralyzed. But the little that I knew of Bell's palsy, I thought people don't die from that. So the fact that it wasn't something that I was going to not be around for my daughter later, it's dealable. It sucks, but it's dealable.
Gibson is sharing her experience on Instagram to show people what vaccine side effects could potentially be like.
The reason why I got it is I wanted to get back to real life. And I have friends who are fighting cancer and they can't get their treatment.
On the vaccine, Andy Slavitt talked about the idea of a vaccine passport in the COVID briefing this morning. He said it's primarily going to be spearheaded by the private sector, but what's the president's position on whether, once the vaccine is more readily available, businesses should be able to tell employees who don't want to get the vaccine for whatever reason that they can't come back into the workplace, or that airlines could reject people from getting on the plane if they have decided not to get a vaccine?
Well, we're going to provide guidance, just as we have through the CDC. There's currently an interagency process that is looking at many of the questions around vaccine verification. And that issue will touch many agencies, as verification is an issue that will potentially touch many sectors of society, as you have certainly alluded to. That's guidance we'll provide. We expect, as Andy Slavitt, I think, alluded to, that a determination or development of a vaccine passport, or whatever you want to call it, will be driven by the private sector. Ours will more be focused on guidelines that can be used as a basis. And there are a couple key principles that we are working from. One is that there will be no centralized universal federal vaccinations database and no federal mandate requiring everyone to obtain a single vaccination credential. Second, we want to encourage an open marketplace with a variety of private sector companies and nonprofit coalitions developing solutions. And third, we want to drive the market toward meeting public interest goals. So we'll leverage our resources to ensure that all vaccination credential systems meet key standards, whether that's universal accessibility, affordability, availability, both digitally and on paper. But those are our standards. It's currently going through an interagency process. We'll make some recommendations, and then we believe it will be driven by the private sector.
And when do you anticipate those guidelines will come out?
I don't have a timeline to provide you at this point, but it's obviously something we're working through, and we want to provide that clarity to the public.
We are at the Canyon Club, where you can only go see the Foo Fighters if you have been vaccinated and show proof of vaccination.
No segregation! No, that we did that! No, that we did that! Should we have separate schools for the vaccinated and the unvaccinated? Because now we have separate concerts for the vaccinated and unvaccinated.
But this is something different, this COVID thing. This is not a normal disease. We don't even know where this thing came from. We don't even know the origins of this thing. This is not a true vaccination. This is an experiment. This is an absolute experiment on human beings, and it can't stand. We can't live in a country where they segregate people and they discriminate against people that vaccinate and don't vaccinate.
No segregation! No segregation! No segregation! No segregation!
It's a very bad situation here. They're making people wear a ankle bracelet. It's absolutely insane. But meantime, we just keep fighting, fighting as much as we can. So we need everybody's help because whatever happens here will happen everywhere. Will happen everywhere. So we're fighting for ourselves and we're fighting for the whole world. But we need help. I need everything, every hand on deck.
It's called the Green Passport. We're not told to wear it, but what they have done is they have essentially overnight created a second-class citizenry, a true medical apartheid that is disallowing healthy, law-abiding, tax-paying citizens from entering their places of culture if they do not participate in this experiment. It's that simple. We've been told there are people who have been kicked out of their choirs, out of their pools, out of their gyms. I don't know who's going to hear the message we're saying. I don't know what is going to become of it. I know that there is no other option than to give every fiber of energy and strength into battling this because there is no other option. There is everything to lose and everything to gain. I think it's actually never been simpler in some ways. And I believe that it's, I believe quite simply that we are privileged to have this truth. There is truth that I think is a common denominator against all these different people, different countries, different languages, and we all are seeing and speaking a very clear truth. And I think that truth is an absolute gift, but it's an obligation. And it wasn't given to us to just sit at home and with this apathy and hope for the best. We've got to all come together because really this is how we win. Making these connections between us, country after country, that is the only thing that these governments fear. They have the wealth of empires behind them. But when the people realize that we are the many and they are the small, they have nothing. They have nothing. And I can never give up on that hope that we're gonna build this force and take our lives back. Because I've said before, I feel like the ball is in the air. It's like this volleyball, and it's a matter of who hits it. We're not going back. There is no going back. There's going forward, and we have a tremendous opportunity. And we have a tremendous opportunity to come together as humans without the questions of religion. They're pushing us so far that they are making this complete reset. We get to actually be just humans in such a beautiful way. As painful as these divisions that they've made, we actually can come together in a way that's how it's meant to be. That's my opinion.
Section 6 and a violation of the Emergency Act 14.1. And refuse to take the test. I tell everybody to take the test. Say no to the test. No to quarantine. Say no. Nobody is calling the test today. Thank you very much. You are a citizen. You have rights.
I went to see the doctor with a touch of the flu, and I'm kinda skeptical of what he told me to do. He said that I should lock myself inside my room for a year, shut my non-essential business down and cower in fear. I said, Doc, I don't know, that seems so out of line. Give it 3, maybe 4 days, I bet I'll be fine. He said, no, you must not, you must wait for the shot. Everybody's gotta get it or society stops. I said, Doc, I don't know, is that all really true? These shots are brand new, they ain't fully approved. He said, no, you can trust us, it's the latest in science. Never mind the people dying, just give up your compliance. I said, Doc, you must have me mistaken with someone pliable. I can't trust you if none of these companies are liable. So I'm gonna stay the course like a one-way road. Take your vaccine and shove it, I'ma just say no. 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 Just say what? Just say no. To the war being waged on our minds and our bodies and our soul. They ain't looking out for you, it's a scam and it's all about control. So doing what they say won't make it go away, oh no. But they don't know the lengths I'll go. Through rain and snow, I ain't so I left the doctor's office and stepped onto the street, feeling troubled by the lies and campaign of deceit. But I'm not easily defeated, I'm not one to retreat. I tried to make a post about it, they deleted the tweet. Undeterred, I stood on the corner holding a sign. The cops showed up, I got arrested and fined. They told me that my words are considered a crime. Next they'll be coming for the thoughts in your mind. I knew they were wrong, I took my ticket and left. They're trying to make it difficult for those of us who resist. And with every headline the propaganda continues. Now they say I'm gonna need a shot to step in a venue. All according to script, going exactly as planned. Next they're gonna wanna put a microchip in our hand. They say conspiracy theory, and that's all that they do. But it isn't just a theory if it keeps coming true. And that's why I'm gonna just say no. 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 Just say what? Just say no. Where we're at now, the final boss battle. I'm not about to back down, I'm hopping in the saddle. I'm coming at it from a different angle like a southpaw. The system is corrupt, so it's good to be an outlaw. I'm rallying the troops, I'm looking for the lions who know that we will never get more freedom with compliance. If the passports happen, we won't get away with just one. They're gonna make us take a new shot every 6 months. It's only getting worse. Every time that we comply more, they take away the rights that our grandparents died for. Time to defy and let the vibes rise more. Make a better world for our kids, what we strive for. And that means getting rid of all restrictions and masks, saying no to passports and resisting the jab. It's time to kick some dust up like an unpaved road. So join me and Chris Sky and just say no. Just say no. Just say no.